Now that you have the machine and carriages threaded, it's time to get the needles and needle beds ready. The needles on the front bed can be set so that they are across from or alternating to the needles on the back bed. To set the needles across, squeeze the intermediary lever and the racking lever together. The symbol in the center of the intermediary lever indicates that the flow combs, and therefore the needles, are directly across from each other. This is also known as full pitch. When the flow combs are set across, the racking scale will indicate position 4.5. After you have set the intermediary lever to the center position, you may use the racking lever only to set the racking scale to position 4.5. The needle beds are level at the left side. The orange notched tool is called a simple stitch selector. It is designed to push up one needle heel and skip the adjacent needle heel at each side. This type of needle arrangement is used to create a 1x1 rib, which draws the edge portion of a garment close to the body. To cast on 50 stitches, divide the number 50 by 2, then find the needle with this number on the left side of the front needle bed. Hold the tool perpendicular to the needle bed and use it to slide the needle number 25 and every other needle to the right of it up so that they are level with a number 1 on the needle scale at each side of the needle bed. You will end with needle 24 at the right side of 0. On the back bed, start by sliding needle 24 to working position 1. You'll notice that every working needle will face a non-working needle on the opposite bed. You will end with needle 25 on the right side of 0. The needle furthest to the left is in working position on the front bed, and furthest to the right is in work on the back bed. This arrangement is called the needle rule and prevents drop stitches at the edges. Press the knit key on each carriage. The knit key is the upside-down V-shaped key. Turn the stitch size dial on each carriage to number 1. Slide the carriages from right to left. The yarn evenly zigzags across the needles. Use a cast-on comb to mount the knitting. Your machine comes packed with a 100 and a 180 stitch cast-on comb. You may also purchase a 50 and 150 stitch comb as accessories. The comb is convex and there is a white tooth on the side that should face you. The holes in the bottom are used to suspend weights and to pull the knitting down between the needle beds. Remove the wire at the right, then push the comb up between the needle beds. The teeth of the comb slide up between the stitches. To anchor the stitch at the left side of the knitting, slip the yarn between the last 2 teeth closest to the knitting at the left side. Replace the wire in the comb from right to left. Make sure the bend in the wire points down between the beds. Use 2 medium weights. You can feel the holes in the cast-on comb with your fingers, then hook the weights towards you. Hang 1 weight at each side of the cast-on comb. Press the circular keys on each carriage. This is the arrow that turns in a circle. Turn your stitch size dial to 3. Knit 2 rows. This means that you must pass the carriages to the right, across the needles that are in work, then back to the left. Press the knit keys and turn the stitch size dial on each carriage to 6. This is your rib stitch size. Your carriages are at the right side of the machine, the cast-on is complete, and you're ready to begin your garment. Set your row counter to 0, then knit as many rows as are called for in your pattern. For this exercise, I'll knit 20 rows. To end the ribbed or double bed portion of the garment and begin the stocking stitch or single bed section, you must transfer the stitches. This means that you will take the stitches from the front bed and place them on the empty needles of the back bed. This is called transferring stitches. Take the double-ended eyelet needle from your accessories kit. Starting on the left, place the eyelet of the tool onto the needle hook. Pull the tool straight up until the needle is in position 3. Push the tool straight down until the needle is in non-working position and the stitch that was on the needle is on the tool. Lift the tool up out of the needle hook and tilt it so that you can grab the needle hook that is directly across from it on the back bed. Be sure to keep the stitch on the tool. Pull the needle up so that it is level with all of the other needles in the row. Then tilt the tool to the back. The stitch that was on the tool will be on the needle on the back bed. Again, pull straight up, push straight down, slide the stitch along the tool, grab the needle hook on the back bed, pull it level with the rest of the needles, and pivot. Up, down, slide, then pivot. If you are knitting on the back bed only, as we are now, you do not have to use the front carriage. You may remove it from the machine. First, press down on the coupling catch, slide the carriage to the side of the machine, then lift up on the locking lever to release the carriage from the machine. Single bed or plain knitting done on the back bed is called stocking stitch. The stitch size used for this type of knitting is always larger than the stitch size used for the ribbed portion. This is so that your sweater will be soft and the ribbed bands will pull in to hug the body. Each different yarn that you use will have its own stocking stitch size, or stitch size that produces a soft knitted fabric. Throughout this lesson, we will call this your stocking stitch size. For this yarn, the stocking stitch size is set to 8. Slide the carriage back and forth across the needles. Listen for the small click at the end of each row that indicates the carriage has cleared all of the needles. As soon as a few rows have been knitted, the edge claws should be hung. These weights stabilize the edges of the knitting and allow the stitches to form properly. Without them, the edge needles cannot move easily. Place them in the knitting so that 1 or 2 teeth hang outside the edge, 1 or 2 rows below the last row knitted. You may have noticed that the needle beds are in the normal position. This means that the front needle bed is exactly level with the back bed. You may use this position for all of your knitting, whether it is single bed or double bed. It is not necessary that you use the upper knitting position in which the front bed is higher than the back. One of the hardest things for a new knitter to determine is the correct stitch size for your yarn. Each different yarn you use will have its own best stitch size. Here's a little trick to help you get to the right stitch size quickly. Drop the front needle bed away from the knitting. To do this, find the bed position levers at each end of the front needle bed. They appear directly beneath the numbered scale at each end. Squeeze the levers together, then release. Do not pull down on the levers. The front bed will fall to the first lower position. Now the knitting is clearly visible. Find the heel of the stitch. The heel, or purl of the stitch, is actually the top of the stitch from the previous row. The level of the heel will tell you whether your stitch size is too loose or too tight. If your stitch size is just right, the heel will be level with the lower edge of the back needle bed. If it is too large, it will hang well beneath the lower edge. If it is too tight, the heel will be directly under the needle hook and the carriage will be hard to move. You may like your knitting a little bit tighter or looser and can adjust 1/2 stitch size either way. But if the heel of the stitch is level with the lower edge of the back bed, then you are very close to a usable stitch size for your yarn. Shaping a garment is accomplished through increasing and decreasing stitches. To make a simple increase, bring 1 empty needle to working position on the carriage side. The carriage side can be either right or left. Knit 1 row. Again, at the carriage side, bring 1 empty needle to working position 1. Always knit at least 1 row between increases. A simple decrease is made similarly. Use your 1x2 eyelet tool to move 1 stitch in 1 needle. Use the single side of your tool. Place the eyelet onto the hook of the needle that carries the stitch to be decreased. Pull straight up on the tool, then push straight down. This drops the stitch onto the tool. Hook the adjacent needle carrying a stitch and pivot to the back. The end needle carries 2 stitches. You may do simple decreases at both sides of the knitting at the same time, regardless of the position of the carriage. Knit at least 1 row between decreases. Again, take a stitch onto the single eyelet tool and move it in 1 needle. Be sure to take the empty needle out of work. There are other types of increases and decreases. On raglan sweaters, the small marks in the knitting where the stitches have been increased or decreased are called full fashioning or Italian fashioning. A fully fashioned increase or decrease is made several stitches inside the edge of the knitting. This creates decorative marks in the knitting and also makes your garment easier to sew together. To make a fully fashioned or Italian increase, use your 2 eyelet tool. Hook the last 2 needles at the edge of the knitting. Pull straight up and push straight down to take the stitches onto the tool. Jump the tool over 1 flow comb. Do not pull the tool towards you or you may drop the stitches. Hook 2 empty needles, leaving 1 empty needle in between. Pull the needles level with the other needles in the row, then pivot the tool to the back. The stitches will fall onto the needles. The empty needle will become your increase. Leave the empty needle in working position. In order to prevent a tiny hole in your garment where the empty needle begins to knit, place the heel of the stitch adjacent and to the inside onto the empty needle. Use the pick side of your red latch hook tool to grab the heel. Stretch the heel to the side, then push the empty needle through. This will create a stitch on the empty needle and prevent a hole in your garment. Full fashioned increases can be done at either side of the knitting regardless of the position of the carriage. You can use a 2, 3, or 6 eyelet tool to make this type of increase. Simply use the tool of your choice to move the edge stitches to the outside, creating 1 empty needle. Hang the heel of the adjacent stitch onto the empty needle. You do not have to bring the front bed down to do this type of increase. Try to get used to working with the front bed in place and you'll save time in the long run. A full-fashioned or Italian decrease is a little easier. You do not have to hang the heels of the stitches. Use your 3 eyelet tool. Take the edge stitches onto the 3 eyelet tool and move them in 1 needle. To do this easily, bring 2 empty needles to the edge, level with the other needles in the row. Carefully place the stitches from the tool onto these 2 empty needles, and the last needle carrying a stitch at the edge. You'll have 2 stitches on 1 needle, 3 stitches inside the edge of the knitting. You may make a full-fashioned decrease at either side of the knitting regardless of the position of the carriage. Knit at least 1 row between decreases. A word of caution. When you're decreasing, make sure that the needle that is no longer carrying a stitch is taken completely out of work. Otherwise, it will pick up yarn in the manner of a simple increase, and you'll be increasing at the same time you're trying to decrease.